The Irishman picks out the fly with his fingers, throws it on the floor, and proceeds to drink. The Scotsman picks the fly out of his pint, holds it over the drink, saying, "All right, you wee bastard, spit it out." Good evening, lassies and lads. It's great to see you here tonight, this 260th anniversary of the birth of Scotch poet Robert Burns. I am honored to celebrate his immortal memory with you tonight. This is my first go at the toast, and I'll do my best. So without further ado, let's settle in for a bit of whiskey, poetry, and blather. Scots, why hey, we Wallace bled. Scots, Juan Bruce has often led. Welcome to your gory bed, or to victory. Now's the day, and now's the hour. See the front, O battle hour. See approach proud Edward's power, change and slavery. Wha will be a traitor knave, wha can fill a coward's grave. Wha so base as be a slave, let him turn and flee. Wha for Scotland's king and law, freedom's sword will strongly draw. Free man stand, or free man fall. Let him on with me. By oppression's woes and pains, by your sons in servile chains, we will drain our dearest veins, but they shall be free. Lay the proud usurpers low, tyrants fall in every foe, liberties in every blow. Let us do or deed. So I hope you're all enjoying the evening. I'm sure that Rabbi would have enjoyed the good fellowship, jolly spirits, and of course the bonny lassies here tonight. It is my pleasure to propose this toast and dwell for a time in the history of Burns, ruminate in the art of Scotland's bard and greatest poet. A man whose work has instilled the soul of Scotland into so many around the world. Robert Burns was born in Alloway, Ayrshire on the 25th of January 1759 and died 37 years later, July 21st, 1796. A short life by any standard. He was born the son of a strict Calvinistic tenant farmer, and for many years his father struggled to make ends meet. Times were hard for the Burns family, but his father made sure his children got special tuition. It obviously paid off in Rabbi's case. When he started writing poetry, he had to keep it secret from his father because it was not a proper thing to do then. 2 years after his father died, and through a connection in his Masonic lodge, his first book of poetry was published in 1786 when he was 27 years old, the Kilmarnock edition. Then gradually, his life began to change. He was one of the first to be a celebrity in his own lifetime and the first modern poet to be hailed as a bard. He has always been particularly revered in the USA, whose struggle for independence he supported. To this day, there are more statues of Burns in American parks and squares than of any homegrown poet. Through Burns' poetry, we share a universal and personal experience. We sing Auld Lang Syne with friends and share the warm feelings and sentiment of that wonderful song. And of course, the lassie's favorite, My Love for You is Like a Red, Red Rose. So simply and eloquently did Burns express his feelings that they have become part of our everyday dialogue. Without thinking, we often use his words and thoughts. How often while reading the morning papers have we pondered man's humanity to man, or resigned ourselves to the truth that nay man can tether time or tide, or steeled ourselves with resolve to do or die. To put the time of Burns' life in perspective, the year Burns was born, General James Wolfe was killed at the Battle of Quebec. King George II died a year later. During his lifetime, the great biographer James Boswell met Samuel Johnson. Cook discovered New Zealand, and there was the Boston Tea Party, the Declaration of American Independence. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were executed. In the year of Burns' death, Napoleon Bonaparte assumed command in Italy, and John Adams became U.S. president. All that and more in just 37 years. It is no wonder he had so much to write about. Exciting and dangerous times, and yet with all this happening, the simple farmer's son became so famous that over 10,000 people went to his funeral. And 260 years later, he is still being remembered throughout the world as we are remembering him tonight. For those who met him, it was an extraordinary experience. He had incredible presence. He had such charisma that men and women were totally charmed. Within 3 months of his poems being published, he was the talk of the Edinburgh Society as a literary and social phenomenon. A lady of the high society of that time wrote, "It will be the misfortune of Burns' reputation in the records of literature that he has been regarded as a poet and nothing but a poet. Poetry was actually not his forte. None certainly ever outshone Burns in the charms, the sorcery, the spontaneous eloquence of social argument, or the unsullied poignancy of brilliant repartee." And she goes on to describe the almost superhuman fascination of his voice and of his eyes, those balls of black fire which electrified on whom they rested. However, it is thought that while Burns happily engaged in flirtations with the women of the higher class, it was with the servant girls he gave his love. It was not only the ladies who fell under his spell. Dr. William Robertson, who was at the time the principal at Edinburgh University, said, "I think Burns was one of the most extraordinary men I've ever met. His poetry surprised me very much. His prose surprised me still more, and his conversation surprised me with more than both his poetry and prose." A remarkable tribute from such a highly educated and intelligent man with an international reputation. He was full of contradictions, Byron wrote of him. What an antithetical mind, tenderness, roughness, delicacy, coarseness, sentiment, sensuality, soaring and groveling, dirt and deity, all mixed up in that one compound of inspired clay. He was a man of opposition. Opposition to the narrow life-denying theology of Scots Calvinism. Opposition to the repressive policies of British government. Opposition to the established order based on class. But he was not consistent. He was a radical who wrote Jacobite songs, a loving husband incapable of fidelity, a man of fiercely independent mind who played safe when his career was in danger. He was mercurial. You can't put him in a box and label him. When his Edinburgh edition was published, 3,000 copies were produced. And he then toured the lowlands and highlands of Scotland. He spent lots of time in the company of the ladies or amongst the residents of the various taverns en route. In 1788, he married Jean Amour, who had already had children by him and was pregnant again. And they moved to Ellisland Farm in Dumfriesshire. The farm was soon found to have soil too exhausted to support crops, and as a result, Burns joined the custom and excise. This meant that in addition to running the farm, he had to cover 200 miles a week on horseback, often in the pouring rain. Somewhat ironic for a man who declared in his poetry, "Freedom and whiskey, gang ye hither." He gave up his farm in 1791 and moved into a flat in Dumfries. His works were promoted in 1792. A new edition of poems was published in 1793, and he moved to a new house. Most of his free time was spent writing songs. In the last 10 years of his life, he wrote some 300 lyrics. But by April 1796, Burns was emaciated through illness, unable to work, seriously depressed, and concerned about his financial affairs. His doctor diagnosed flying gout and prescribed, among other things, immersing him in the sea, the Soloway first. For a man with a serious heart condition, it proved fatal. He died on 21st of July, 1796, and over 10,000 people made their way to his funeral. Burns lived a full life as a father, husband, lover, intellectual, poet, and songwriter. In his art and life, he loved beauty and honesty, while despising arrogance and hypocrisy. He loved a good party, a good story, a good song, and a good drink with friends. He loved life, loved the lassies, and loved being one of the boys. That is why we are celebrating his spirit and toast his memory 260 years after his birth. I ask you all, Scott or not, to fill your glasses, stand, and raise them high as I offer the toast to a poet of the ages, to Scotland's best loved son, to the immortal memory of Robert Burns.
Immortal memory.
Thank you.